I understand that a lot of you are looking at my relationship with Catie and are just like,
I have strong opinions on the furniture stuff because I feel like I'm right in that situation.
She is 3 weeks away from marrying a man she has known for less than a year, and instead of spending that week on cake tastings and seating charts, Catie sits her fiancé down and tells him she wants to open up the marriage, not after the wedding, not a year down the road, if things get rocky. Before they have even said, "I do." We're getting into the full timeline on this one, because by the time we reach that conversation, you're going to understand exactly why some fans think this is the most honest couple on the show right now, and why other fans think Josh is about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Stick with me, because the open marriage moment isn't even the wildest beat in this story. It's just the loudest one. By the end of this, you're going to have the full receipts, how these two actually met, the confession that should have been a turning point and wasn't, the welcome party that turned into something nobody saw coming, and the exact reason fans keep comparing this couple to one of the messiest open marriage storylines this franchise has ever produced. So let's not waste any time. Let's start from the very beginning, because the way these two met tells you almost everything you need to know about what is coming. Catie is 26. She's from Portland, and by her own description, she spent the last few years as what she calls a rent-free digital nomad, traveling the world by pet-sitting for strangers. Josh is 30, from Cambridge, England, and the first night they ever spent in the same room, Catie was out drinking with a group of his friends. By the end of that night, she had made out with 2 of them, 2 of his friends. Somewhere in the middle of all of that, she also ended up kissing Josh. He walked her home. They kissed again on a bench outside her place, and somehow that turned into an actual relationship. She invited him to Milan. He went. By the end of that trip, he proposed, and if that sounds fast to you, that's because it was. We are talking about a relationship that started with 2 of his friends, moved to him, survived 1 international trip, and ended in an engagement before either of them had any real reason to believe this was built to last. There was no slow getting-to-know-you phase, no year of dating where the cracks usually start to show before you've signed up for a lifetime commitment. Just a whirlwind, a proposal, and suddenly a wedding date on the calendar. That speed matters, because everything that happens next happens inside a relationship that never really had time to find out who these 2 people actually are once the honeymoon excitement wears off. If that timeline alone doesn't raise a small flag for you, hold that thought, because it gets more complicated fast. In the season premiere, Catie sits down for a confessional and tells the camera she has OCD, and that part of what comes with it is intrusive thoughts that push her to want to make out with people, especially when she's been drinking. She doesn't dance around it. She says on camera that within the past 2 months, while she is engaged to Josh, while they are actively planning a wedding, she has kept doing it. Kissing other people, while drunk. Her exact concern, in her own words, is that this is going to be a hard habit to give up. Not that she has stopped, that she's not sure she can. Sit with that for a second, because that's the actual foundation this relationship is standing on, and Josh said yes to marrying her anyway. Now here's where I want to slow down, because this storyline gets framed almost entirely around her OCD, and I think that framing deserves some pushback that has nothing to do with making fun of her. OCD is a real, often exhausting condition, and intrusive thoughts are a real symptom. Plenty of people who actually live with this disorder will tell you they have zero interest in acting on the thoughts that show up uninvited in their heads. Having an intrusive thought is not the same as repeatedly choosing to act on it while drunk, on camera, with multiple people, while engaged. The show wants you to hear the word OCD and immediately stop asking questions. I don't think you should. The question isn't whether Catie's OCD is real. There's no reason to doubt that it is. The question is whether pinning a repeated, ongoing pattern entirely on a diagnosis lets everyone involved, Catie included, off the hook a little too easily. That's a storyline problem, not a Catie has OCD problem. And it's worth keeping those two things separate as we go, because this show loves nothing more than collapsing the two together. And remember, this isn't some abstract hypothetical pattern we're talking about. Go back to the very first night these two ever met. Two of the people Catie made out with before she even kissed Josh were Josh's own friends. That detail got treated as a cute, slightly chaotic meet story in the premiere, the kind of thing you laugh about at the wedding toast. But hold it up against everything that comes later, and it stops looking quite so cute. It's actually the first data point in a pattern that runs through this entire season, and Josh walked into this relationship already knowing it, already having lived through a version of it himself on night one. So that's the premiere. Now let's talk about the party, because this is where Josh stops being the chill, easygoing Brit the trailers sold you on and starts looking like a man slowly realizing what he signed up for. Catie throws him a Welcome to America party, his first real introduction to her friend group on her home turf, the kind of night that's supposed to be a celebration. And at some point during that party, it becomes clear that several of the men in the room are people Catie has hooked up with. Not some vague, drunken blur from years ago. Recently. Multiple. Josh is standing at his own welcome party, watching his fiancé's exes mingle through the crowd like it's nothing. He doesn't blow up. He doesn't storm out. But the cracks show. He's visibly uncomfortable, and afterward he basically says he's been giving Catie a lot of grace on this front, and having it thrown back in his face like that is not okay. Think about that for a second. He flew across an ocean to start a new life with this woman, and the welcome party for his arrival doubled as a lineup of her hookups, and if you thought that was as far as it went, it isn't. In a separate conversation, Catie admits something else entirely. She's made out with most of the single men in her own run club. She runs a club, the group of people she sees on a regular, recurring basis, week after week. This isn't a one-off drunken night out story anymore. This is a pattern stitched directly into her everyday social life, the same social life Josh is now expected to fold himself into as her husband. Every Tuesday run, every group hangout, is now a room full of people who already know exactly what we're talking about. Think about what that actually means for the day-to-day version of this marriage, once the cameras stop rolling and the wedding hype dies down. It's not just one awkward party Josh has to push through and never think about again. It's a whole social ecosystem he is marrying into, where a noticeable chunk of the people in it have a complicated history with his future wife. That's not a single red flag. That's the wallpaper of an entire life he's signing up for. And he's expected to just smile through it because confronting it head-on risks looking like the controlling, jealous fiancé nobody wants to be on this show. So naturally, Josh finally asks her the question that's been hanging over the entire season. Does she actually want to be with him? And she says yes. Clearly, on camera, yes. But, and this is the part I think a lot of viewers are sleeping on, she doesn't stop there. She goes on to admit that sometimes she still thinks about the chemistry she used to have with some of these past flings. Not that she regrets choosing Josh, just that the old chemistry crosses her mind sometimes. Josh's response is basically to accept it and move on, the same way he's absorbed almost everything else so far this season. And look, I want to be an understanding partner. I do not want to be the guy who makes his fiancé feel ashamed for being honest with him. But there's a real difference between being understanding and quietly absorbing red flag after red flag, because the wedding is already on the calendar, and turning back feels harder than just pushing forward. Which brings us to the moment everyone's actually talking about. As the wedding gets closer, the preview's TLC has been dropping tease something bigger than anything we've seen from this couple so far. Catie telling Josh, weeks before the ceremony, that she wants an open marriage. We don't have the full scene yet. TLC is holding that one back, which honestly makes sense, because it's clearly meant to be the moment that defines this couple's entire season. But think about the timing. Not 6 months into the marriage. Not a year in, when relationships naturally evolve and couples sometimes renegotiate what they need. Weeks before the wedding. after a season of makeout confessions, after a welcome party full of exes, after the run club admission. Now, with the dress already picked out and the venue already booked, she's bringing up an open marriage. And if you've watched this franchise for any length of time, you already know what fans immediately did with that information. They pulled up Jasmine and Gino. Because Jasmine and Gino agreeing to open their marriage did not exactly end in some peaceful, thriving arrangement. It became one of the messiest, most chaotic storylines this entire franchise has ever aired, and fans watched it unfold in real time, week after agonizing week. Now those same fans are watching Catie and Josh walk toward that exact same cliff edge, except this couple is doing it before the wedding even happens, instead of after. Remember how that one went? Because a huge chunk of the comment section right now is basically just typing, "Here we go again," in every font available to them. Online, the reaction is genuinely split, and I think both sides actually have a point, which almost never happens with this show. One camp is firmly in Catie's corner. Their argument is that she's being more honest with her partner than almost anyone else in this franchise's history. She isn't hiding the urges. She isn't pretending to be a different person just to get him down the aisle. She's laying everything out on the table and letting Josh decide for himself what he can and can't live with. People in this camp will point out that plenty of couples on this show have walked down the aisle hiding far worse secrets than an honest conversation about needs, and that Catie, whatever else you want to say about her, has never once pretended to be someone she isn't. There's something genuinely worth respecting in that, even if the timing is rough. The other camp looks at those exact same facts and sees a slow-motion disaster in progress. A guy who keeps absorbing hit after hit because he loves her, right up until the day he realizes he agreed to something he never actually wanted, in a marriage that isn't easy to just walk back out of. This camp tends to focus less on Catie and more on Josh, asking why a man who's clearly uncomfortable at his own welcome party keeps choosing to smile, nod, and move the wedding forward instead of hitting pause and actually figuring out what he needs. Both of those readings can be true at the same time, honestly, and that tension is exactly why this storyline keeps blowing up every comment section it touches. Here's my actual take, for whatever it's worth. I don't think Catie is some kind of villain in this story. I think she's been remarkably consistent and remarkably upfront about who she is, starting from the very first night they met, arguably more upfront than this franchise usually gets out of anybody. My concern isn't really with her honesty, it's with the timeline. An open marriage conversation that happens organically, after real reflection, inside a relationship that's had time to actually breathe, is one thing. An open marriage conversation that gets dropped weeks before a wedding that's already paid for, already planned, already announced to a television audience, is a completely different thing. Because at that point, the pressure to just say yes and keep the train moving is enormous. I don't think Josh has had a single real pressure-free moment to sit with any of this. And honestly, that worries me a lot more than any individual makeout session ever could. So here's where I land on the whole thing. This isn't really a story about whether Catie is too much for wanting what she wants. It's a story about whether either of them has actually had room to make a real, clear-headed decision, or whether the wedding date itself has quietly been making the decision for both of them this entire time. Is Catie just being radically honest about needs Josh should have understood from day one? Or is Josh agreeing to an open marriage because backing out at this point feels harder than just going through with it? I genuinely don't think this is an easy call, and I think that's exactly why people can't stop arguing about it. What makes this one different from a lot of the chaos we usually cover is that nobody here is obviously lying. Nobody's hiding a secret family back home. Nobody's running a scam. Nobody's pretending to be someone they're not. It's just two people who fell for each other fast, built a relationship on a foundation that was never especially stable, and are now trying to figure out, on national television, whether honesty alone is enough to hold a marriage together. Sometimes that kind of story is harder to watch than the obvious scams, because there's no clean villain to root against. There's just two people who might genuinely love each other and still might not be right for this. And here's the thing, nobody actually knows yet, including me. We still don't know what Josh says back. TLC has shown us the bombshell gets dropped. It hasn't shown us the response. Does he agree to it just to keep the wedding on track? Does this become the fight that finally makes him walk? Or does he surprise everyone and turn out to be more on board with this than the trailer wants you to think? Every theory is still on the table right now, and that's exactly why this is the storyline to watch heading into the wedding episode. Tell me where you land in the comments, because this is one of the more interesting splits we've had on this show in a long time, and I want to know if I'm being too hard on the timing here or not hard enough. And if you're curious how this couple actually stacks up against the rest of the season, stick around, because Catie and Josh are genuinely not even the most concerning pairing in season 12. Not even close. That breakdown is coming next, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. I'll see you in the next one.